Welcome, everybody. This is Brookside Chats. I'm your host, Brooklyn.
I'm your lovely co-host, Pojo.
And today we have a guest with us.
Hi, I'm the guest. My name's Landry.
Hi, Landry.
Hello.
So tell us a little background about yourself.
Boy, you should have given me a heads up for that question. I'm a college student. I am both in your fraternity or your former fraternity. You graduated. But yeah, we've been friends for a couple of years, and I'm studying communications and creative media, which kind of leads into the topic that you told me about today.
Which is what makes a good villain.
So, to start out this topic, what would you guys say is your favorite villain?
So I was thinking about this a little bit earlier when we had this question come up, and I was thinking about memorable villains, like the ones that stick out to me from like the movies and books of my childhood. What am I nostalgic for? And I think that the one that stands out most of all is probably Magneto from X-Men.
And like, why is that? Like, is it just like, you know, the character that like, or the actor that plays him? Is it just the coolness factor, or is it just like ambitions?
So Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender were the ones who played them in the movies, and both of them did a tremendous job, I think. But without the comic books or even like the cartoon, it's kind of hard to get an idea for who Magneto is from all perspectives. And having a villain like Magneto who is on a similar page to the protagonist of X-Men, and by protagonist I'm referring to Professor X in this analogy, I guess. I don't know if it's an analogy.
Because they're good friends, correct?
They are good friends, but I think that Professor X is probably the main protagonist of X-Men. Even if he's not the main character, he's definitely like the hero if you think about it, because he's like the brains behind the operation, and he's working for mutant rights and trying to show humankind that mutants aren't dangerous. And Magneto is kind of fighting the same battle in different ways, and I think the way that their methods contrast and the fact that they're really good friends makes the dynamic really interesting. So that's why I like Magneto.
So, Pojo, what do you think?
For your question, my favorite villain, I would have to say, hands down, would be Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Really?
Yes, and partially because it's part of the movie, and the movies he was in, it kind of like bigger scale, but it's very much, he's very memorable. Like, if I showed you a picture of a tentacled beard crab man, you would be like, oh yeah, that's Davy Jones. How he articulates a lot of his words, and maybe because I think part of that is the actor.
Yeah, Bill Nighy. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
I believe so. He was the minister of magic in the Deathly Hallows Part 1.
Yeah.
Which
he's really good.
Oh, he's a fantastic actor. And then he's very powerful, obviously, because I mean he can't die unless certain requirements are met. And he's a good match for the main group of protagonists. The final thing is that his motivation is understandable, because I mean it boils down to he's cruel because the person he loved was cruel to him.
Yeah, there's a sympathetic aspect.
And he just wants to make everyone hurt as much as he hurt or is hurting.
I think, and that's really interesting as well. If you guys are curious, in my opinion.
Of course. As
yes,
the host of this show,
please, Brooke.
You're allowed to tell us what your favorite movie is.
Oh, thank you. My favorite villain, I would say, is Anton Chigurh. I believe is how you pronounce it, and he is the main antagonist for No Country for Old Men, and it's just the aesthetic of him, the intensity of him. Even if it's just something as simple as a coin toss, you just get this fear.
Yeah, I saw that. He's chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched some video essays about that movie, and apparently he's supposed to represent death and how, like, it's equal that, like, I mean, everyone's gonna eventually have to face him, and whether you survive or not is, I mean, in a coin flip essentially.
Right.
Or just if you're on his bad side too as well. Like, I think one of the first introductions of him, it was like with the pressure air hose.
Yeah.
And some guy just has his car pulled over to the side of the road trying to help this dude, and he just takes this air hose, puts it to his skull, it says hold still, shoots this air hose and kills this guy instantly without even like saying his name. And
Yeah,
it's just
definitely.
so
He's terrifying.
yeah.
Oh, very much. But with that said, if a stranger just came up to you with an air hose and said hold still, would you actually do that?
No.
Yeah.
But
but that's just in the case of the movie.
It's also
That's
like
just a
maybe
little
that guy is
nitpick.
just, very, very fearful and like doesn't know this guy, and it's
Yeah.
like he's like, is he gonna do something to me? And if I run away, will he come after me? Or
did you ever see Seven? Yeah, Matt and I watched that.
That was the
months
one
ago.
where they got superpowers.
No.
Was that it?
No, that was the one with the serial killer doing the 7 deadly sins.
No. Oh,
Yeah,
that was
with Brad Pitt and
ooh.
Morgan Freeman.
Very
That's
good movie.
another villain who Bardem in No Country for Old Men reminds me of. It kind of in a different way, but it's like what it boils down to is like them being almost irredeemably evil.
Yeah.
Is that, and like Matt and I both brought up for our favorites.
People who are sympathetic.
Yeah, people who are sympathetic. And this character never gets an actual name in the movie. It's John Doe is what they call him, and he's also just chilling.
Well, I feel like he's chilling because of how obsessed he is.
Yeah.
Because they raided his house or whatever, and they just see like shelf after shelf of these journals filled out with what was it? Lines from the Bible, I believe. Just how obsessed he is.
Yeah. No, and I think that worked so well in that movie as well because of how he is kind of in opposition to the main detectives in that movie, to where they both believe, well, Brad Pitt's character believes that the world is redeemable even though there is bad, there are dark things in it, and Spacey portrays that character, and he also recognizes the darkness of the world and becomes a vengeful spirit instead of somebody who's trying to save it. He's trying to destroy instead, which it makes up a good yin and yang, and I think that is another thing that really contributes to making a good villain in a story.
Actually, I just thought of something too. One thing I think to really get like an iconic villain is a really good introduction. And the way this guy introduces himself, he walks into a police station and it's like, "I'm here," and like just
covered in blood.
Yeah, it's like
He
like
yelled at the Brad Pitt
or the
being
detective.
like, "Notice me."
Mm-hmm.
Says his name. And
came out of nowhere. I remember the first time I was watching that movie, and I will never forget that scene because it just took me by surprise because it just took the rug out from under the characters who are trying to solve this mystery, when the villain comes in and says, I'm done having this chase with you, I'm coming in right now to have this conversation.
Because like with most like murder mystery movies and stuff like that, the antagonist is hidden. You don't know who it is. Is it this person? Is it this person? Is it the person that was with us all along? This guy just has guts to
and
just
you
step
don't
in.
know what he's planning, which makes it all the more terrifying.
That's just a show of how, I would almost say, cocky or arrogant he is.
Yeah, definitely.
But moving into a different direction, a good villain, old, or I should say classic Disney movies, for instance, like Hades from Hercules,
Yeah.
stole the show.
Oh, definitely.
Like, you really don't get, at least in the Disney sense, those type of villains anymore. Or like Scar, or...
Yeah, I agree, because there's something about a theatrical villain who has no redeemable qualities at all. Like, they're not a sympathetic villain. They're not right in some way. They're just evil and loving it. And that is so fun to watch.
Because they just fill apart and they have fun with it.
Yeah.
Although I will say that does get kind of old after a while. Like I'm thinking of like for instance, like a lot of like earlier Marvel movies. Like I can't recall like what was it, like Iron Man, for instance.
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, like it's just.
I thought Jeff Bridges was kind of one of the better villains in the early MCU, and I definitely agree with you. The Marvel movies have a big problem with super generic villains, but I don't think that's what Matt and I are talking about.
Gotcha.
Like I'm talking like when you think of Hercules, outside of the name, you think of how Hades performed.
Okay.
Yeah.
The out there, like how they reach a lot of people.
The ones that come to my mind when I think of villains like that are Skeletor, Megatron, Starscream, and Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars.
The original trilogy.
If you watch Ian McDiarmid, now, even in the prequels, not so much the sequels, because the sequels felt hollow to me, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But watching Ian McDiarmid in the Star Wars movies just absolutely munch on the scenery with the just crazy evil laughs, just walking out there bearing it all like, I'm evil and you all are gonna love me for it. That is so much fun to watch.
Oh, very much, yeah.
The Joker's another good one like that.
Well, so one of the things about what is right about Batman is that his rogue gallery is so iconic.
Oh, definitely.
Like, I don't want to say majority, but a lot of the villains in there, you can, like, if you see a picture, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's Two-Face or that's Joker.
But is that just because of like they've been featured a lot, or like is it the relatedness, or is it like, I'm trying to think of like any like iconic villains outside of like, you know, just Batman, like, because Superman, I can't, like, what was it, General Zod, right? Was that
Zod,
one?
yeah.
Zod was a villain. You got Lex Luthor, which I think is really iconic as well.
He's a very
and it's like the
one.
kind of, you want a villain that can match or be an obstacle to your like hero. You want one that you can understand. You want one that has a good backstory. One iconic villain, I think, that's just really the only time they actually feature this villain in the movie is, of course, the dumbest portrayal, is Mr. Freeze with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I will fight you on this because I love Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze.
I think they made him too goofy, though. It's just a guy that's trying to save his wife and save, like, and go with every justifiable means to, like, save him, and it's just ice pun after ice pun after ice pun after ice pun. Just gets a little
well,
stale.
I think that what kind of ruins it for you is that you don't really like puns. But for like Landry and I, we love that.
So it's not even the puns for me. Granted, I love the puns, but just to give an example, like my dad and I have this very fond memory of Batman and Robin watching Mr. Freeze in polar bear slippers with a bathrobe conducting his men to sing Mr. White Christmas. That is hilarious. And I know that a lot of people don't like the Schumacher Batman movies. And I think that's because they watched them wrong. I really think that if you watch the Schumacher movies with the right perspective, they'll be a lot more appealing to you because
they're more of like they're not as serious or as serious. Like you can't use that type of like villain in like say the Christopher Nolan Batman.
Exactly.
Like you can't.
If you stuck Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze in The Dark Knight, it would have been a terrible movie because the tone conflicts. But you got to remember, for like almost 30 years. The public perception of Batman was Adam West.
Yeah.
Which is goofy and fun and campy. And Tim Burton made 2 Batman movies that were dark and gothic and serious, and I love those movies so much because I love dark Batman. But the Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, the Schumacher movies, that's less about being a dark and serious Batman and more like a 90s extreme version of the Adam West genre. And if you watch those movies thinking this is like Adam West on steroids, then it becomes a whole different experience and you can just sit back and watch Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy just tear it up on there. It's great. I love it.
Well, Batman tangent aside.
You can't talk about movie villains without talking about Batman.
True, because I mean, like Joker's such an iconic villain.
He's a hotly sought after role to play.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
It's the chaos, it's the complexity. Because you think like, oh, it's just some madman, but it's like with like Heath Ledger's Joker, everything had a point. Everything was just so like you can't tell me that as an agent of chaos. None of the things that he did wasn't like really like was not unrealistic at any point. Like the burning of the money, the absolute like using the hostages as like, you know, the pretend to be guards so they can be assassinated by the police squad. Like none of that, it's just madness and craziness. Or like that boat scene where you have like 2 boats and both of them have explosives, and one boat, if you press the trigger device of like one boat, it would blow up the other one. And you know, you're in this kind of questionable dilemma, and it's like, well, if you know a certain deadline hits, guess what? Everybody dies.
But it turned out to be false, right? Or was it false where he wasn't gonna actually blow up if they reached that deadline? The time deadline.
I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen The Dark Knight in like 5 years. I don't remember.
But
fair enough.
Still, we're talking about it, and still like the
no,
realism.
He definitely had a point, which is
Sometimes our own actions get so convoluted with the actual situation that we do these hasty things because we want to save ourselves.
Yeah.
Are we really, as innocent as we believe, or are we also as evil as like, you know, the Joker?
And
as crazy as it
so here, I have a little gripe about the Joker. I would say he's my favorite, but he reminds me too much of Jigsaw, where in the movie it seems like he knows the future. Like he knows that half his face burning off and his girlfriend dying would break Harvey dead. That just, I mean, maybe this is just because this is who I am, but I would not say, oh yeah, that would totally break this. Upstanding guy.
Have you ever read The Killing Joke?
I have read parts of it.
So the Killing Joke, for anyone who doesn't know, was written by Alan Moore, the same guy who did Watchmen, and it was a one-off graphic novel that was about, you know, Batman and the Joker. And in it, Joker tries to kind of prove to the world that everyone is sort of one really, really bad day away from being just like him. And he tries to push Commissioner Gordon, over the edge by shooting Barbara and kidnapping Jim.
And showing him all this horrible
just putting him through hell. And it's a really interesting read because you also get some of the Joker's backstory. But I think that's kind of going towards what you're talking about, where he was trying to prove to Gotham in the Nolan trilogy that everyone is just a few circumstances away from being just like him.
So here's my thing about Alan Moore. He's legendary.
Yes.
Because, like, for the Watchmen series, like, everyone, you can classify technically everyone in there as a villain.
Debatable.
Well,
So-
all the heroes, I should say.
You know, I was thinking about that Killing Joke. Another movie you can also talk about, which is about like kind of like that individual that snaps and becomes kind of the villain in his own mind and causes this mass destruction. It's a movie called Falling Down. Do you know anything about it?
I haven't heard of it.
Well, it's this like single dad. His car and he's trying to make it to his daughter's like a birthday party, and along the way his car breaks down, so he has to leave it on the side of the road, and he just tries to walk there, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, he tries to like order something from like a simple Burger King, and then at that point he snaps. Friends to like kill everybody, friends to just like, you know, go for this
I think
mass
I know what
destruction.
you're talking about, because in the movie, he does like something that would be like normal, but it gradually escalates into things that are absolutely horrid to do as a person. And it's simply because more and more things are like just going wrong or whatever.
And I guess, like, is he as iconic as the villain? Because, you know, can we like relate to like that like point of like, you know, we just had a bad day, and like sometimes we do frantic shit that makes us snap. Like we yell at people that we don't want to yell at. We like get into these arguments, or like, you know, you just see guys that get super frustrated to the point that they get pushed over that edge in a way.
Which I think relates back to one of the points that I believe you, Landry, and I were making, that to some extent the villain has to be relatable, because everyone can relate to just getting upset and then continually having bad things happen to you, and you just get more upset and you're just not in the right mind.
I can agree with that to an extent, but I was talking about this with you, Brooke, before a while ago, that what makes a great villain and an iconic villain really depends on what movie or what media they're in, what hero they're stacked up against. And the same could be said for a hero, because a hero is also only as good as his or her villain. It's, you know, because in a Disney movie where you've got an incorruptible great protagonist, you gotta have a really evil villain who is just beyond evil and loving it.
Like, for instance, Thanos, he's not...
No, I don't think Thanos applies to that. I think Thanos is very relatable.
He's an outlier,
in a sense.
I should say.
He is
an
kind of an
outlier,
outlier.
I guess. Or Loki.
Killmonger.
I feel like a lot of them are actually, like, for the live action, they're not just playing the role.
Well, that was the point that I was going to go into next with those characters, is that when you have a flawed protagonist, which, you know, should be often, because flawed protagonists are more interesting and relatable, I think. When you have a flawed protagonist like Black Panther, who was overcoming a lot of stuff in that movie, like you were saying with Killmonger, or Tony Stark, who was trying to save the world for the last 10 years before Endgame, and, you know, anyone else.
Yeah.
A villain with similar flaws and similar goals, who uses different tactics that are, you know, opposed to the heroes. That makes for a really interesting story. You have to have that sort of other side of the same coin in a really well-rounded story in order to make the hero-villain dyad really interesting.
Yeah.
So
And if I may, a quick question to both of you. So, in the Lord of the Rings, the main villain is essentially Sauron.
Yes.
And I feel like he's a very iconic villain, even though we don't really see him. Or we don't know much about him. Because
Right.
he has 5 minutes of screen time? And most of that is just him being a giant eye. So why do you think he is an iconic villain?
I personally am not prepared just on any level to go into any in-depth analysis of Lord of the Rings because I'm not nearly as well read as some of my peers are on this. I've read the books and I've watched the extended editions of the movies. That's almost it. But if I'm gonna take just a very surface level guess at why Sauron works and why he sticks in the public consciousness the way that he has, I would say that he is one of those villains that I mentioned earlier, not necessarily in the personality department where he's loving it, but where he is just emblematic of evil and the darkness and just the wall that you have to climb over or pass through. He's the big obstacle that you have to beat. And I think everybody has something like that in their lives, or at least something that you think of like that. He's a very simple villain.
Yeah.
But the villain isn't necessarily the point.
Evil.
Yeah, he's not necessarily the point of the story either. It's a classic tale. It's a very by the numbers hero's journey done to perfection. So I think what Sauron does in The Lord of the Rings is give Frodo and Aragorn and the rest of the Fellowship the opportunity to grow as characters and become great heroes from being lowly hobbits and rangers who are sort of displaced from where they should be.
I think the other thing too as well is just, for instance, I think it's the less is more complex. So the less you see of him, the more you grow interested. Because if you're seeing all these Nazguls, if you're seeing all these different orcs, and this is the big guy, this is the guy that's super evil, you're going to be more interested in impact because who's the guy that's pulling all the strings all along? And a good example, I would say, of the less is more impact of an iconic, I would say, villain. Think about Jaws. In the original Jaws, how many times does that shark actually show up?
I was just about to bring that up. I'm so glad you brought it up.
Or the Babadook too, as well.
Yeah, the Babadook is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for supernatural horrors, or at least the movies, that's kind of in its own category.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
it's
Because
the
it's
fear
a ghost.
it's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
It's the fear of I don't know where that thing is.
Yeah.
Is it here? Is it behind me? Is it in front of me? Is it so that's why and just seeing that it's kind of what else is it a good example?
The Conjuring.
No, I was thinking The Thing. Because nobody knows, is that alien, that shapeshift alien you or you? It could be anywhere, and then when it does strike, it's whoa, you wouldn't expect it. So
I definitely agree with that. The fear of the unknown does make a great horror movie villain. I don't know that I would say that Sauron is one of those that taps into the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just that simple.
Gotcha.
I feel so for Sauron, and this is just my opinion. I feel like he just fills a role for a movie that is so loved that it's just he automatically gets that status of good villain.
I agree, because if anything, the more standout villain of the Lord of the Rings is probably Saruman.
Yeah, the
White Wizard.
The White Wizard.
And I think, I keep bringing up this thing about how the hero and the villain are diametrically opposed, and he's kind of the anti-Gandalf, which, points in his favor for doing that. But he's also an interesting villain because he sort of taps into fears of industrialism, I would say, and I think that's a theme in the Lord of the Rings. Not a huge one, but you know, there's a lot of love put toward places like the Shire that are
Very,
you know, pre-industrial sort of, you know, lots of gardens and flowers and
Comparing that to like the
living off the land.
yeah, living off the land.
comparing that to like, you know, the
Saruman's
orcs.
industrial production of orc soldiers and burning down the trees.
And having that awesome, what was it, nymphs? Or is that what they were called?
Urukai?
No,
The compound?
the tree things.
Oh, Ents.
Oh, Ents.
Ents.
Oh.
Yeah, you know you messed up when the Ents are pissed off.
The symbolism.
I mean, how evil do you have to be to wake up these tree creatures that just sleep for hundreds of years and don't do anything?
So here's my issue with that. So the Ents essentially only got involved simply because, you know, they were
their
cutting down
territory was
trees.
being encroached on.
But that's not technically evil, at least in my book, because I mean, and this is very up to, it's very subjective of what you see as evil, but like simply improving on yourself, like industrialism, or at least that was what I see as the main goal of it.
That is interesting.
But you can also view it as like, you know, symbolism, because I mean, look at like the U.S. Like,
I mean,
I'm
it
looking
is
at it right now.
It is symbolism in a way, because, you know, I think that the industrialist thing that Saruman starts in Lord of the Rings is symbolic of the way that the Industrial Revolution and everything since then has been sort of building on the land in a way that a lot of people don't like. And I think that Lord of the Rings romanticizes the natural world, and if you look at the movies, you can definitely tell that's true with just the total masturbatory shots of New Zealand's landscape, which are beautiful, of course. But
too bad it doesn't exist.
But when you have a sort of romantic idea of the natural world, and the evil is destroying the environment, and the good people are trying to save the environment as a secondary goal, kind of.
Yeah.
You know, that says something. And you're right, the evil is subjective there, because a lot of people would say that industrialism is good for humanity, and I tend to agree to an extent. But, you know, like you said, it depends on what your plot is, who the good people are and who the bad people are.
And to quote a prequel, the Jedi are evil in my point of view.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good movie.
I like it.
But more or less, I feel like even the term villain is all, again, subjective. Because some people can say, oh, the heroes are actually the villains because they're in the way of progress, or...
Well, I took a class on film appreciation my freshman year.
Did you appreciate the film?
Some of them.
That's good.
I appreciated some of them.
You got an A.
it was just all Twilight.
No, so he was talking, the professor made a point that stuck with me, and he said that the one thing, or like, film changed forever the year of the first Earth Day. And he explained why, because that was a really hot take, and I was like, what are you talking about?
Earth Day,
The holiday.
yeah, I don't know the exact date, but like the appreciation of Earth.
Yeah, the environmentalist
Yeah.
movement changed everything. And if you watch old movies, you can definitely tell this. You know, if you watch old westerns especially, where the cowboys are the heroes and the Native Americans, the Indians, are the villains.
Quick question, are we talking like spaghetti or American?
Either one.
Okay.
I mean, there's some
More
evil cowboy.
American ones. But
It's got good, the bad, and the ugly. Like you had like
That's a
different, like,
spaghetti.
evil-
Or
That one is a spaghetti western.
really no one's a good guy in that one.
But like early ones, especially in the 1950s.
yeah.
The cowboys, the people from civilization are the good guys. The Native Americans are evil. The land is evil. Because the narrative in society up to that point was that, we had manifest destiny, where it was our job as God's chosen people or whatever to conquer the land and set it up for humans to live there. Because we were meant to live here and have suburbs and all that jazz.
Yeah. And with that said, that does not reflect our own opinions.
Not necessarily. No.
It does not. Manifest Destiny is...
No. I totally disagree with Manifest Destiny. But that's not the point. The point is...
this is just for...
Earth Day.
The point is around
Earth Day.
Earth Day. Earth Day was the point that he decided was the turning point. Now, I don't know if it was that exact or not. I wasn't there. But after that point, you find a lot more movies where it romanticizes the natural world a lot more than the human world, the industrial world, the civilization. And you find that industrialists and billionaires and those sorts of people are the villains in a lot more movies nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting pattern.
Which, I mean, and if I may, and this is just tagging into the last or I guess we lost that episode, tagging into the mental health episode that was corrupted. I think it was around that time that you just mentioned where there was a big focus on mental health patients having access to nature, being like, oh, all this.
With like moral therapy.
Yeah. With like scenery and whatnot. And I feel like that was, I mean, I guess to help add evidence to your point.
Yeah, environmentalism has definitely become a thing. And I think that kind of makes Lord of the Rings an outlier, technically, because it was written in the 50s.
Yeah, but I don't feel like people were like, oh, screw the environment.
I don't think it was that overt. I think it was just like, this is the wild landscape and we have to conquer it to make it safe for Americans.
Because
I was gonna say, I was gonna argue, like, when it, well, was Earth Day around the 70s, right?
I think it was started in the late 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Could be early 60s.
Because I would assume like early.
I don't remember exactly.
I was gonna say early 60s would kind of like make sense for all the changes, because at that point the U.S. was going for like the civil rights.
The hippies came. What's wrong with calling them hippies? That's what they were called.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say like, Martin Luther King Jr. was a hippie.
I don't think Martin Luther King Jr. was a hippie either. I think that's something completely
civil rights and like environmental protection.
I feel like we're.
I was thinking something more along the lines of the Woodstock kids.
Yeah.
You mean the 3 that were born without birth certificates?
No, the ones who went to Woodstock.
Wait, back on.
Love a tangent.
Yeah. I guess like one thing I was gonna mention before
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the first year for Earth Day was 1970.
1970?
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Okay.
That sounds about right. Woodstock was 68, 69.
Along with never mind. Go on.
I was gonna say, I'm curious about like what you guys think about like anti-heroes and like, does that like show as like, are those technically what would be our realm of like villains, or would that just be, like a main antagonist, or like what would you say?
An anti-hero can be, again, this is all usually up to the writing, but can be better than just a straight out villain. Because I feel like for an anti-hero, they have to incorporate redeemable qualities.
It's hard to talk about anti-heroes without talking about the Punisher. Do you agree? The Punisher is a really controversial figure nowadays, I think, because of the way that the symbolism is used in some right-wing political areas. I think that's kind of why anti-heroes can be a little dangerous, because they have to be done right.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think the Punisher is one of those anti-heroes who is done right. Especially when he's not the main character. Because when you have other POV characters on the scene who make it very clear that the Punisher is not a hero, it's easier to understand the character and his relationship to the world. When you have people who, without the correct context, just take in Punisher media and see a guy with big guns and lots of ammo who takes to the streets and just kills people, that can be a little dangerous. Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Matt, Pojo, that people should, or the anti-heroes should have redeeming qualities, I should say. Or at least make sure that their negative qualities are accentuated correctly. Mm-hmm. And now I'm not advocating for censorship in any way, obviously.
That's another topic we're going to cover.
That is another topic entirely. But I think that anti-heroes should just be handled with tact, and a lot more tact than I think they've been given in recent years.
I feel like for anti-heroes, and maybe that's because I don't really have a lot of media that I've consumed with anti-heroes, but usually they lean more towards just being the villain or being the hero. Like, for instance, Deadpool.
Would you classify Deadpool as an anti-hero?
You know,
I would, yeah.
Might be.
Because he really doesn't, like, what, and maybe this is because, like, comic books, but what values or what just causes that Deadpool incorporates?
I would give an interesting perspective for like an anti-hero.
What's that?
Kind of, I'm a bit of a weeb, but I think Sasuke Uchiha in like Naruto, like Sasuke in Naruto would probably be the best example of an anti-hero, because he's not going with the lines of like the actual main protagonist, which you can't tell by like the actual name of the show. Naruto is the protagonist. That's why he has a name, not the show. He has his own agenda. He has his own way, and sometimes it kind of conflicts with the actual hero of the show as well. But yet, him and like the main protagonist always try to like coincide. So it's really kind of like a coin flip as well. But I could also see the argument that he was also kind of a main villain or a main obstacle to interact, and isn't that the point of a villain, right? Mm-hmm. So to be an obstacle.
So I'm looking a little bit more at the anti-hero things that the internet has to say, and I looked at the definition specifically.
Okay.
And it just says, in a very broad sense, that an anti-hero is a main character in a story who lacks conventional heroic qualities, which can mean anything.
So an unconventional hero.
Unconventional hero. So I guess Deadpool qualifies.
Mm-hmm.
Punisher qualifies. Your person qualifies. I don't watch Naruto, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. I'm just a weeb, guys.
I don't think watching Naruto makes you a weeb, because that's pretty mainstream.
Okay, but anyway, I just figured it would be an interesting point. I'm always curious, like, if that would coincide with like being a good villain too. It's just being an anti-hero. Like, you're not realizing that this person isn't like going off the rails so much that he actually becomes the villain himself, because he's just trying to make like do things his way, and you know.
So you mean like The Godfather? Michael.
Yep.
Ooh, I still
Definitely a good. You haven't seen The Godfather?
No.
Okay, we're not going to be these guys who hound somebody for not having seen The Godfather, because
Except
that's a conversation.
You will once we stop recording.
Yeah, no, I definitely will when we stop recording.
Mhm.
But it's been done to death, so I'm not gonna humiliate you here
Oh yeah.
for
no,
watching an
please,
American
please.
classic.
But
No, you go ahead.
I guess like we talked about the relatability. We talked about a guy being pushed to the limits to like understand. And we talk about like the aesthetic. We've talked about I'm trying to think what else we talked about for
Just filling a role for a very good movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think one other thing that could be a really good what could make an iconic villain too is it's somebody that's been with the hero all along and then just betrays them and they become the obstacle along the way because no one sees it coming, or it's just something that they don't realize, oh snap, my greatest enemy is somebody
Actually,
I knew.
closer than we thought.
Like, would you say in a way like Darth Vader would be interesting to put in that category, because nobody, like at that point, nobody expected Darth Vader to be like Luke Skywalker's father.
Yeah. I feel like with Darth Vader, he was never really, and maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, but I feel like you're talking about a betrayal here.
Mhm.
Someone that we've gotten used to, and then like mid-movie or second movie or whatever, says, you know what, oh, joke's on you, I was actually the bad guy and I got what I want.
Yeah, like maybe I guess another instance I would think is like Ra's al Ghul in like the Christopher Nolan series, because you know he was always assisting, he was the mentor, he knows everything, but then he betrays, you know, Bruce Wayne, and he has every advantage towards him, and it's a huge obstacle because how do you beat your own teacher and be the master of your own game?
So I feel like with Ra's, he just had a different idea, if that makes sense. So where Batman or Bruce Wayne was pretty much like, oh, Gotham can be redeemed or saved. Ra's was, no, burn it down, start anew.
Well, again, we're coming back to the diametric opposition thing that I've kept bringing up. Is in order for any villain to be at all good, you have to be in some way that the other side of the same role.
So, any final thoughts, guys?
Are we recording?
Yes.
Oh.
You go
Brooke's
first.
the real villain here.
Brooke is the real villain here. That's the final thought.
Gotcha.
I feel like the IRS is the real villain.
I'm not going to address that. Honestly,
Mr. Taxation is theft.
I've never said that in my life.
Yeah?
Honestly, the one thing that I feel like has become clear to me during this entire discussion is the best representation of a hero-villain or anti-hero dynamic is Titan, Metro Man, and Megamind. Full stop.
From Megamind.
Yes, I'm done. That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I got nothing else. Anyways, this has been Brookside Chats. Thank you for coming out. I'm your co-host Pojo.
I'm your host, Brooklyn.
Oh, am I supposed to say goodbye?
Yeah, say goodbye, you schmuck.
I'm Landry. I don't know if I'll be back or not.
You will.
You probably will.
Okay.
We'll blackmail you into it or something.
Oh, jeez.
All right, back to the
Say
base.
something controversial.
You guys should pay me next time.
You know, I wish I got paid.
This is Brookside Chats signing off.